So, hello everyone. I have a wonderful story for you. Okay, so we'll start with the book before, I start my monologue or speech of introductions to the story, my experience with it, what I want to cover, various goals, and so on and so forth. But we'll just go through the title, author, some tags, chapters, interesting titles, and so on and so forth. So let's begin. This is Wandering Reader, and so I'm going to cover, or I'm going to do the same thing I did with Tomorrow Hasn't Arrived, which is we're going to go over this title. Chinese title is 我只会拍烂片啊. So that translates to I only make bad movies. And the author is Wu Ma Xing. So Wu is 一声, so first tone. Ma is third tone, so Ma down and up, and then Xing. Wu Ma is just a surname. That's just a name from the spring and autumn period. 春秋时, so that's just a period of time in China. I think somewhere before the Three Kingdoms period, I believe. Um, a lot of Confucian ideals and so on and so forth, specific time in Chinese history. And then Xing is just, a name. Um, we'll talk a little bit about all this in a little bit. So let's go over the title, we'll go over the summary, and then I guess I'll go over the author himself. 我只会拍烂片呢. I'll go over the Chinese characters and we'll go through everything really quickly. So 我只会 means I can only. Pai, which is to film or make, it's just a measure word to film. 烂 is just poor or bad, spoiled usually, like spoiled food. 片 is just a short form for movies. 电影片, right? So 片 is just a quick sentence. And then is just automatopoeia, something you'd say at the end, like ne in Japanese or something. So let's look at the various tags. 完本, which just means finished. Let's see what else. Contract, right? That's signed. So there's a VIP, so you can pay for various chapters. I only read free chapters, just how I do things on principle, especially for stories like these, especially since, give me 1 second. Oh, it's not at full resolution. Since, this is not my copyright, we'll talk about that in a little bit if I want to. City, 都市, so it's just city environment, background, urban life. So it's going to be covering aspects of urban life. I'll tell you why I love this genre so much. Some of the other things I've recently read and why I decided to cover this. I talk about some of my goals in my speech and monologue. So he's written a couple of books, the author, right? So at the beginning, whenever an author writes a new book, they'll always like to plug in or advertise their new book, especially in the table of contents, or at the very end in the testimonials, right? So they'll talk about the finished books, various side stories, new books they publish to push, their other work and to keep the continuity of things going. Sorry, oh, I have something taking up um, my my taskbar space. So he has a new book called Why Can't I Make Games? 我为什么不会做游戏 has been published. Very popular one. It's very much in the genre of losing money to be a tycoon. If you know the story, you know the story. Very prodigal or the silly alchemist. So very prodigal based, trying to lose money. A little bit of system, a little bit of future knowledge, that they call that technology flow. I'm not going to go too much to the terms, just because there's no audience at the moment, and I gotta make this for myself, and then maybe a future audience should decide, anyone decide to click on this video, which will probably be buried as far as I know, since I don't publish regularly. I'll read the summary and then I'll go into more of my monologue. Sorry, I'm boring everyone. Do you believe it? I said in the future we will create an era that will make Hollywood tremble. At that time, dot dot dot. Someone saying that. That year, Yan Ying, oh, Yan Ying, okay. Yan Ying, so Yan meaning swallow and Ying meaning movies, so swallow films or swallow movies. Yan Ying University, 大学, eating and waiting to die. The senior scumbag who was called rat shit by the counselor got drunk and bragged to his brothers. This is I like that quote. You'll understand why. This is very reminiscent of Homecoming. Rebirth is like those flowing years. I did read that, but I don't know if I published. He thought it was just bragging. What should everyone do after sobering up? But a week later, when the brothers smashed the pot and sold the iron to build the crew and waited eagerly for him to shoot, he panicked. Later, after that year, the mentality of everyone in the world film circle exploded. I guess we'll go over the breakthrough of grammar and idioms, but I'm pretty sure most of you guys can infer what's going on. Smashed the pot and sold the iron. So that's give me a sec. That's a reference to a rice bowl, right? So usually, when you're working, that we call that a rice bowl, and so you eat out of that rice bowl. That's how you make your money. That's how you make your living. An iron rice bowl means, you have a very sturdy backing or a very sturdy job, so you can keep eating out of it. Smash the pot means to smash the thing with which you're cooking. So basically, quit their jobs. Sold the iron means after you've smashed the pot, you break it into pieces of iron, you sell that off, right? Take loans or whatever, and then so you could kind of infer what they're saying in the summary. I'm not going to break it up too much. So we'll go into some of the tags, why I enjoyed this so much, and the author himself. This is inspirational. So this is selling dog blood would be the term. 血 sushi or something like that. Selling blood, right? Chicken blood or whatever is a saying. Inspirational, which means very dream, aspirational aspect. Perseverance, very, very similar tag, which means never giving up. But it's a very specific genre tag. And then star, 明星. This means actors, it means celebrities, usually in the film industry or circle. These are very interesting tags. A couple of other ones, especially in the urban life, would be do-over, right? 回忆. They don't have that tag because it's just so common, and that's just par for course in the urban life genre. You'll get a couple with superpowers and then rebirth, but it really doesn't need to be said for something like this. So let's talk about the author himself, 五马行. You can see by the red tag, it's just 大圣. It literally just translates to great god or big deity, right? One of the great gods. He's just a very acclaimed writer in the platform of China Reading Group, um, Magic Union Fantasy Group, MUFG, no, CMFU, China Magic Fantasy Union, which is now known as Qidia or a starting point, Rising Star would be a cool one. He's a total of 7 works, so he's written a total of 7 books with a word count of, I think that's 10 million. That's correct, and he's been doing this for 5 years. About, right? He's written 7. Oh, some of these are great, right? I'm not a big star. 我不是一个大明星啊. I'm not from the great Duming Tang Dynasty. I really don't want to be a star. Another one, similar premise. They always like to write within a certain genre or cover certain titles, but talk about different main characters and paths. We'll talk about why that's so amazing in a little bit. Why can't I make games? That's his more newer one. 我什么做游戏？我为什么不能做游戏 or something like that. You made me a superstar. That one's his newest one, and I think this is his first one, The Happy Life of a something. See more of his works. We click here, right? He's been writing for a while. 7,400,000 words, so it's almost a million. That's half a million. That's a whole 1.35 million, 2 million. So you can see that all adds up. When did he start writing? 2014. Yeah, so it's been about 8 years. Dang, that's a long time. I'm not gonna talk too much. I think I said I would do a monologue. I think I did plenty of that, but I guess we'll talk about why I really like the story, what I wanted to get out of it. So why do I record these things? I really enjoy these stories, but I always want to add some sort of special meaning to it. It wasn't after I recorded my first story, Tomorrow Hasn't Arrived, and going through all the chapters, that I kind of realized why I really enjoyed it. The fact that I can go back and look back and listen to the enjoyment I had in recording it, the emotions that I had, um, really made me want to continue reading it, right? I wanted to end off on a quote and be mysterious and aspirational, but as I do these things, that a lot of the monologues and speeches that I have in my head kind of dissipate and they kind of evolve into something less structured and as grandiose or verbose as it is in my head. So, those things change. So, I guess we'll talk about why I really enjoyed this and then what type of emotion I kind of want to convey. So, I was recently reading one of those Losing Money Be a Tycoon, which is you trying to fail, but somehow you end up succeeding, right? So, mission failed successfully, right? All those ones where you try to fail, but you succeed instead, right? You're trying to fail at something, but things just end up working out anyway. And I think one of those reasons why those stories are so great is because you're trying to root for a guy you're rooting for a guy to fail, but in essence, you're rooting for him to succeed, right? So his mission failed successfully, right? Just the whole meme in and of itself. But there's something special or inspiration for that seeing an underdog, and this is particular to the genre, which is called this hot-bloodedness of youth. Now, I don't want to show my age too much, just because I like to remove my presence from these types of stories. I have a very interesting philosophy of acting older than I usually am, so I'll always, feel younger than I act, which is an interesting dichotomy. Um, just interesting. Um, yeah, I was gonna say a couple other things along those lines, but I don't want to get too much into it. But I just want to, display a youthful passion, to be a dreamer, right? I've come across so many different ways people have said it. A small fiction on Twitter once put, right? A genie once asked a girl, like, do you have any wishes for me? And the little girl said, I don't have any wishes, but I have a lot of dreams, right? And it goes back to this idea of being a dreamer, right? The most recent um literature. What was it the most recent one I read? It was very interesting. Not only make bad movies, I just posted on Twitter actually. Oh, disaster artist, which is, I don't want to be a daydreamer, a person who daydreams, right? To have this internal or great dream. I want to be a person who makes dreams come true. And it sounds so cliche, things you hear in a Disney movie, what is it, Magic Kingdom and so on and so forth. Where it's like, to be young is to have a big dream, right? To have a grand dream. And then as you grow up, as you go through life, you kind of, your dream maybe necessarily becomes smaller, but it kind of disappears or dissipates. It becomes less dreamy as you try to make it happen, right? To make dreams come true. And I don't really like the way they put it, right? To make the most out of life and so on and so forth. It sounds too grandiose. Your head is up in the clouds and your feet are barely touching the ground, sort of deal. So I wanted to make it more realistic. That's why this monologue is so confusing and boring and calm. But I wanted to capture this hot-bloodedness of youth, right? This youthful regret, right? And there was like this quote, maybe not a particular quote, but just this phrase or set of words. I wanted to go over this concept of we privileged few. Now, the meaningfulness of this comment or quote will only be useful to me. And, if I don't say it, it'll probably be forgotten in this long length of time. Right? I've come across many a quote that are just so beautiful that will only make sense in my own head in the context of which I've read. To the point where in some of these web novels I've even cried. Right? Lord of War, I think there was one is like, he died for food. And it's a very simple sentence, but if you know in the context of the story, it is so beautiful of what food represents to this group of people, right? Food represents life. Talk a little bit about that in some Tang Dynasty or dynastic industrialization web novels, right? Sword of Daybreak. I am Sam, right? Why do you want to be called Sam? Because the people in the fields are called Sam. Because, the people who just want to make a normal living are called Sam. It is such an ordinary name, his friend said, and that is why it's so beautiful, right? All these beautiful quotes. I've gone so many of these, right? I don't want to like appear sad, which is like, some of these web novels are my friends, but I do live by some of these quotes. And yeah, I don't want to get too much in the topic because I find it too sad and I don't want to be remembered as such. But things like the King's Avatar, 生活的路还是很长的呢, right? Life, the road of life is indeed very long, right? When I was a younger person, it was a very long statement to me to like think in terms beyond just tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Things like his, he could feel his heart beating in his chest, a nuclear powered heart that would never die, right? That's from Tony Twain, Godfather of Champions, like chapter 6 of 768. At the very end, there's also like, all victory is fleeting. What they would say to Caesar on the steps of Jupiter. Even things like Tomorrow Hasn't Arrived or 明日未领, Earth Era, right? What would it be, um, to leave behind no regrets if in another 50 years in the power plant one that I don't want to go into too much because a little bit too much spoilers and you're welcome to read it on your own. Oh, we live in Nanjing. Time is the most powerful force in the universe, and we are fighting against it, right? All the stars in the sky are enemies, Gurren Lagann, right? I got that from music director of the music department. all these things about dreams, of hot-bloodedness, of youth, right? The circle of fools, chapter 120 of Homecoming, rebirth is like those flowing years. And I wanted to try and encapsulate some of that hot-bloodedness, that dreamy aspect, that daydreaming side of me. And I wanted to convey that. I know I'm very calm right now, but if you couldn't tell, sometimes I get really excited. I get very monologue-y. Also, in the environment in which I feel comfortable with will tend to impact how loud I speak, the volumes to which I go to. But I'm really excited and I hopefully can convey the emotions I feel and do justice. I know this isn't the first time I've read this. I always leave the first reading to myself to consume on my own time, to let it filter through as I experience the various stresses and joys of reading a story like this. And I hope that, in reading this, I convey just a little bit of how I felt when I first read this, the things I've enjoyed, as out of all the great and terrible ones that I've read, I've picked some of the best to curate. And there's many, many other reasons I talk about we privileged few, YouTube being a privilege, right? Sometimes, to others, this would be seem like a paradise, right? YouTube definitely is a very, very beautiful privilege. Um, and some people may not feel that way. Some people may feel it's work, but I truly do believe it is awesome. Anyway, hopefully you guys are gonna enjoy. I will only make bad movies. Sorry for the very grandiose nature. If you didn't like it, you should definitely have skipped to chapter one. Sorry for taking up so much of your time, but some of these titles are beautiful. I want to create an era. I have big dreams. Empty gloves. White Wolf. You must compensate me. Whereas no one is trash. Chapter 29 is so interesting. The way the story in which this direction takes and the story it tells, I think every author has very specific ideas they want to convey, the things that they enjoy. Some authors write more beautifully or passionate than others, and some cover various aspects to each will enjoy. Each main character is different and they all take different paths. And I think this is a very unique one. And I hope you enjoy and maybe decide to read a little bit on your own. And the next video will cover chapter one. I want to create an era. And we'll stop here.